So today's April 24th, 2018, and I'm Bryan Yungeberg. I'm interviewing Roger Edwards about the Mameluke sword and about his service. So just to start off, Roger, just tell a little bit about yourself and the service you had.
I graduated from K-State in 1970. I joined the Marine Corps that very year. In 1968, I signed up for it, and I went in as a second lieutenant. And I was married at the time and had one child, my oldest son, Luke. I went in for one purpose, and that was to serve my country and to take advantage of the benefits available and to do my part. I come from a long line of warriors, and we all serve. That's what we did.
Yeah. Okay, so my next question is about the sword. Tell us a little bit, what is the sword that we're talking about?
It's called the Mameluke sword. It's the longest carried personal weapon of any branch of the service. Every branch has their own ceremonial sword, and the Mameluke sword, according to legend, was presented to Presley O'Bannon when he was over off the coast of Tripoli fighting the barbaric pirates in about 1804. And you say to yourself, why in the world were we over in the Mediterranean Sea fighting pirates? Well, we were starting our commerce as a young nation, and the barbaric pirates had come out and raid our ships. So I think the president at that time was Madison, and he decided that he was going to stop this. So he sent a fleet of Marines over there to fight the pirates. And they were victorious and gained a good reputation, and in honor of that, the legend has it the sword that we have today was patterned after one of the old type swords that they had back then, and it was presented and is still carried by the officers today. When you join the Marine Corps, you're given an allowance to buy your uniform, and then it's yours forever. And the sword cost $100 at that time. And we kept it in the family all those years, and when my kids were little, they all liked to take it down once a week and play with it and pretend that they were fighting the pirates. Well, they all wanted to know, who gets the sword? And I said, well, whoever becomes a Marine Corps officer gets the sword. So the youngest at the time was Chad, and he graduated from K-State in mechanical engineering. And I asked him what he wanted to do, and he said, oh, I know one thing for sure, I don't want to sit behind a desk being a mechanical engineer. So he joined the Marine Corps. I asked him, I said, why don't you join the Air Force if you want to fly? And he said, I'd rather be an enlisted Marine than an officer in the Air Force. And I said, well, that might come true then, because the chances of you being flying in the Marine Corps would probably be slim and none. But he persevered and rose to the top of his class and became a Harrier pilot for 20 years. Yeah, he's retired, and he's got the sword. And when he stood office, when I presented the sword to him, when he became an officer in the Marine Corps, and they grandfathered it in, because it belonged to me, it had my name on one side, just like that sword up there has Mike Breeding's name on it. And when he stood sword inspection, and there is such a thing as sword inspection because the sword has to be a right length, and they all treated it with reverence because it was grandfathered in. And he never failed the sword inspection. But if he had to buy his sword, I paid $100 for it, If he, at that time when he was in, it would cost him $500. That's what you call inflation.
Yeah.
So he still owes me $400, but he hasn't paid me up yet.
Picture.
Picture of Chad. This is a picture of Chad as a young second lieutenant. He served 2 tours overseas and retired with honor.
Yep.
Is that good?
So what does the sword like mean to you and your family, like other Marines?
It stands for everything. I mean, it's the one unique thing about the Marine Corps being the longest. The Marine Corps is the oldest and longest serving armed forces in the United States. It was formed before the Revolutionary War. So they had the distinction of being the oldest branch of the service. Their department, they put him into the Department of the Navy because the Navy needed someone to float around on their ships to protect them. So they put him in there. So the men in the Navy, well, my brother was a Navy guy, and they all like to say, well, the Marine Corps is just part of the Navy. And I always tell them, it certainly is. It's the men's department, which doesn't go over too well.
Yeah.
But we had fun with it. They're all good. They're all good services. They're all Army, Navy, Marine Corps, Coast Guard.
Yeah.
They're all great.
So do you have any like stories about your service that you want to talk about?
I did what I was told. I went where they told me to live. I did my job, and I got an honorable discharge after 3 years.
Yeah.
I came out as a first lieutenant.
And do you have any stories about the breeding family?
The breeding family?
Yeah.
Sure.
Just about like a sword or anything? Any stories about like or anything?
Yeah. There are 2 breeding boys, Mike Breeding, and the younger one is Pat Breeding. Pat Breeding was same age I was. Mike Breeding was the same year that my sister Grace was, and they were in class together. And Mike, as Pat always said, Mike could walk and chew gum and watch television and carry on a conversation and eat a bowl of soup and never miss a beat anywhere. But he said Pat always felt like he got left out on the left out on some of that knowledge. And Pat joined the Marine Corps as soon as he got out of high school in 1965. And I said, "Where are you going, Pat?" And he said, "I'm going to fight a war." He said, "I'm going to get over there before it's over." I said, "Well, where's this at?" He said, "Vietnam." And I said, "Well, I had no idea where Vietnam was." It was called Indochina at the time, and that's about how much we had any knowledge of Vietnam at that time. But he got over there, is guaranteed to go to Vietnam with a 2-year enlistment, and that's exactly what he got. And his older brother followed him into the service. He was a KU graduate. We won't hold that against him. He was a good guy and he was pretty smart. Nancy, that's quite a shirt you have on there. Anyway, Mike, the story goes, he said, well, he's not going to let his little brother have all the war stories to tell at the family reunions, and he joined the Marine Corps also, and he became a pilot. And as you can tell, he served with distinction, and he flew off a carrier over there, and he was on his 3rd mission of the day, 2nd or 3rd mission of the day, and they lost contact with him, and to this day they never recovered any of the wreckage, and they never recovered the body. So Pat, on the other hand, when he went over, he was with the grunts on the ground, and he received a sniper round in his arm, and he got a Purple Heart, and he lost control of that arm, and he came back to the States. So he served with honor and pride. The breedings were fine men.
Yeah, they were. Let's see. Is there anything else you would want to talk about? Because I don't really have anything I don't have any more questions for you, but I don't know if you have any other stories you would want to tell.
Well, not in the present company right now.
Yeah.
And, we just don't need to go to, if you want war stories and things like that, you have to go and find a book and read it. And
Yeah.
there's always someone else's version of what went on, what right or wrong.
No, I understand.
So just let it go with that. And as far as any young man today wanting to serve their country, step up to the plate, I highly recommend it. How do you feel about that?
How I feel about it? Well, I'm not for sure. If I was called to go to fight, I would definitely do it. But I don't know, I've had my grandparents fight in the war, so they wanted me to. I would definitely would.
Every man has to answer that question, and women. They're all subject to, we don't have the draft anymore, but they can all serve their country in some capacity. In fact, there's even generals now that are women. So I think the armed forces are changing drastically as we speak, and there's a lot of opportunity, a lot of things that a young person can do out there today.
You good?
Some of the history behind could be, well, I don't know, I think it was in here, that maybe some of that, all I know is what I read in that big book. And, the Mameluke sword is something you carried as ceremony, and when you're an officer of the day, an officer of the day patrols the barracks at night with the NCOIS, the non-commissioned officer in charge, and you walk the barracks, and there's 50 guys in racks, 25 over here and 25 over here, and you walk down the middle of the squad bay, and make sure everyone's in their rack and not goofing around and doing inappropriate things. You always had your sword on, and when you have your sword on, you're under arms, so you have permission to wear your cover.
Yeah.
It's not a hat, it's a cover. The Marine Corps has all these different names for things.
Yeah.
And then that was your sidearm. That was just one of the purposes of having a sword. The non-commissioned officer in charge, he also had a sword. And it was a different type of sword, it wasn't the same sword. Early on versions of that sword, up there on the handle, that's plastic, some type of hard plastic. The earlier ones had ivory. And if you wanted to spend about $1,000, you could get one with ivory on it. And you see this sword right here, it's broken? Right there in that corner. Right there.
Yeah, it's just chipped
That
off.
plastic. You can take that all apart. Take those nuts out and pull that all apart and take those little finnels off. Part of it. But I enjoyed watching you play basketball. You're totally fearless. When you go into the big guys, they're about 6'10", and you would jump with the best of them. and they'd knock you around and you'd get right back in there though.
Yeah.
Utterly fearless. And I thought you should have shot more because you had a good shot. And there
This
were
year?
some, yeah.
Yeah, I
There
know.
were some nights that you were hot and man, you just won every game that time.
Yeah.
Those 3-pointers. But then you went to where you weren't shooting as much that
I know. I just started driving more.
Yeah. But anyway, that's not part of the interview now, is it?
No.
I do. I've marked the pages that talks about the Mameluke sword and everything you need to know about it. And when you're done with it, sometime in the future, make sure I get it back.
Okay.
I think I got my name in it.
I'll get it back.
I know you would.
Yeah.
You want Chad's picture for any reason?
We can take a picture of it. Want that?
Now, somewhere in my trusty little camera, I got 2,000 pictures. Anyway, we have a picture when I gave the sword to Chad when he got back from graduation. And it shows a picture of me handing the sword to him. And that's the one picture I think you ought to have.
Yeah, that'd be nice.
That would kind of draw your
Yeah,
passing the sword on.
yeah, the meaning of it, like the importance of it.
Yeah. Yeah, and Connie, I looked for a half hour through all these pictures and I couldn't find, I just saw it here. Like I said, my camera's really not as fancy as a lot of these. It's 15 years old and I used it when I was on the Marine Corps, or in the river. Well, Nancy.
So you'll find a picture maybe to get it copied out for
Yeah.
the report?
Maybe I can give get your cell phone number and then I can send it to you.
Yeah, you
or
can do that.
something.
I can write it down.
Write it
Yeah,
down.
that'd be good. Yeah.
You got a
Okay.
piece of paper in here.
Yeah.
Okay. This is the model plane that was given to us on Veterans Day of 2017 by John Juarez. He too had been in the service, but he was a great admirer of Mike Breeding. And so he worked on his plane, commissioned different parts done by different people, and hunted worldwide to find the right decals and things to make it totally accurate. And this would be the plane, a model of the plane that Mike took out 3 times that day, brought home twice, and did not return the 3rd time. Picture of him in the middle of the case. The Vietnam bracelets, the one on the bottom out of the box is one that Mr. Juarez had worn up until the time he came up for Veterans Day. And it had Mike's name on it, as all the bracelets had one of our men's name on it, but he had worn it enough that it wore the name away. This is a picture of the bridge out over the Blue River that was dedicated in memory of Mike Breeding. I have to come see it in person, not a very good picture. And the whole showcase is a tribute to Mike, pictures of he and his brother Pat and their parents, pictures of him as a baby. And here's a better shot of the chest, the case that has all of the awards in it and his flag of honor.